Hello and welcome back. Now what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be creating the menu which will show us what it is that we are actually going to do, and this menu is going to have a couple of choices. And so what we need to do is we need to define a function which is going to be called display menu, and this is just going to pass in self as well. We're not going to pass anything else to it, and we're going to have a variable created inside of here called menu list. Now this is going to be a list of all the options which we can have, and so we're going to have start new game, and then we're also going to have save game. However, I'm not going to show you how we create this. This is going to be something which you can do later on after we've done this course, and to see whether or not you can expand upon what I've taught. And then we're going to also have load game, which again I'm not going to show you how to do. Customize setup. And finally we're going to have exit. Now with this list, this currently is no good, so what we need to do is we need to output this list. And the reason why I've put it inside of a list this way is so that we can have it dynamically numbered. So if you wanted to add an extra item to the end of it, then it would always work, no matter what really. So we need to print out what the user should do, and this is going to say type the number of your choice. And if we print an extra spare line, and then we're going to do for I in range from 1 to the length of the menu list plus 1. Now the reason why we're doing it from 1 to the menu list plus 1, just pass that so we don't get errors, is normally an array starts at 0, or a list starts at 0. And because we want the numbers to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we don't want it to start at 0. We're going to start it at 1, which is what the first parameter in this range function is. And the second parameter is the limit, or the maximum. And because the array starts at 0, this is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. However, as you can see, there's 5 elements. And if we start at 1, then the number should be higher than the number of elements we have. So what we're going to have to do is add 1 to the number of elements we have, which allows us then to reference the highest number, in this case exit. Now if we delete that pass, what we're going to do is we're going to do print, and we need to convert the integer, which is the counting variable I, to a string so that we can output it in the same print statement. And we're going to put an extra space in there, and then we're going to do menu list, and then we're just I minus 1. Now what that allows us to do, if I was to do monster.display menu and run this, here what you can see is that we get the each of these elements is now listed alongside the number corresponding to it. Now there's one more thing that we need to do here, and that is we need to get the user's choice. And so here I'm going to create a variable called choice, and we're going to get the user's input, and we pass in a string there, which is what is output next to. So here, here you can see we now have this area where the cursor is flashing, and that means we can type there. You'll also notice the text is green. Once the text is green, that is input that the user has typed. And so here, for example, we might type 1 and then press enter, and that would start a new game. Now obviously it's not doing that yet, and that is because we haven't coded it to do that. But we are slowly working our way there, so no need to worry about that. Now we can either process the user's choice within the same function. However, that isn't really a very nice way of doing it, because we should split up as much as we can. And so what I'm going to do here is going to create a new variable, a new function called menu choice, which is going to pass in self and the choice that the user has made. Now if I've just passed that and go back into the display menu, what we can do here is we can do self, which is referencing this class, and then we can do menu choice, and we're going to pass in choice, and that is all we need to do with this function. Now this function has been completed. So if we go down to menu choice again, now this one is going to be quite simple. It's just going to be if else statements. But the first thing we need to do is check whether or not the input is valid. So what we're going to do is we're going to try. This is going to be a try catch method, and what this does is it tries to do something. If it returns an error, then it runs the exception instead. And what we're going to try and do is try and convert this choice to an integer. Now if it is an integer, as in they've entered a number between 0 and 9 and however long they want to, then it will work and that will be fine. It will just convert it to the same value that it already has, so no difference and no harm done. However, if it is, say, if they passed in a letter or a character, which is not a number, so say a hyphen or a slash, something like that, then it would return a value error because it can't convert a letter into a number. And that's where we catch it with this exception, and that's where we're just going to set choice is equal to 0. Now you'll notice that we don't actually have a choice of 0, we've got 1 through to 5. And what this choice of 0 is going to do is going to call and get caught by the else statement, which says that it isn't a valid option. Which means that what we need to do now is we need to build up some if statements. And this is going to be very simple. It's going to be if choice is equal to 1, then start new game. If choice is equal to 2, then save game. If choice is equal to 3, then load game. If choice is equal to 4, customize setup. And if choice is equal to 5, then we're going to exit the application. So because we haven't actually created any of these functions yet, there is no point us putting the code in. So if we just put in passes for now, and once we've got this done, we can look at starting to grid which gets displayed. If choice is equal to 4, this is where we customize our setup, and that is going to be one of the last things we actually code. So if we leave it as that for now, then that would work fine. Now we have the elif and the choice of 5. Now 5 is exit, and for exit we don't actually have to do anything other than system.exit and put in the integer 0. Now because you'll notice here we have an undefined variable system, or sys. Now this is really because we need to import system. If we import sys, then if you come back down here you'll see that this error has gone, and if we run again and go to number and type in number 5 and click enter, you'll see here that it's terminated the actual application. That is exactly what we wanted it to do, so that is good. And remove that semicolon, we shouldn't have put that there. And finally we've got the else, which is if they've entered a 0 or a number which isn't in the menu, then we're going to say that was / a valid option, try again. And what we're going to do is we're going to recursively call the display menu. Well, it's not really recursive, but we're going to call the display menu again, and what that will do is it will run this screen again. Now unfortunately, because we're inside of an IDE, which is to say we're not using terminal, we can't actually clear the console, so we'll have to make do with having a lot of text loaded above the previous text. Whereas in console there's functions you can run which clear it, which mean that code which was once there is no longer there. So I'll show you here. If I do ls, then if I did clear, suddenly it's all gone again. That idea is only possible within the console and not within the IDE, or at least not simply within the IDE anyway. And so what we're going to have to do is we're just going to have to make do with having to scroll through the console, which isn't too bad, but it's not ideal. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to just do display menu. And now that is the menu choice and the menu being displayed, completed. We don't need to touch these functions again, which makes life a bit easier. Now there's one more thing that we can need to do now, and that is inside of the init function, we are going to put the call towards this display menu. If we add an extra couple of spaces at the bottom, then the scroll bar for the horizontal scroll bar won't get in the way of the text, which it sometimes seems to do. That's why I just did that. And here we're going to call self display menu. So now what you'll see is previously we had to have the monster.display menu down here for it to do anything. This time we don't have that inside. Instead inside of the init function, we can run it and we can see that it is being run as we wished it was. And then with any of these, you'll see that they terminate at the moment, and that is simply because we are passing what it's currently doing, and once it's past that, it gets to the end of this function and nothing else happens. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is we are going to set up drawing the grid. Now, you'll notice earlier that we had the max width and the max height set, and these are going to be also customizable within inside of the customized setup, but by default they're going to be 5 and 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function down here. We're going to call that draw grid, and all we have to do is pass in self. Because these variables are global, if we do self dot and then the variable name, it allows us to get the value of it, so it makes little difference. But what we are going to do is we're going to do height is equal to self dot max height, and width is equal to self dot max width. Now here we're going to have a nested loop, which is going to be what draws the grid for us. Now we're going to do y and then x, and the reason is because when you have two loops within each other, what it does is the first loop is going to act as the vertical axis, and the second loop will act as the horizontal axis. Now if we were trying to make this a 3D game, then we'd have 3 nested loops, and the first one would be the z-axis, the second one will be the y-axis, and the third one will be the x-axis. It's just the way that it works, and if you'll see in a moment that it does work. And this one again is going to be range from 0 to width. Now inside of here we're going to do y is equal to the string of y, and x is equal to string of x. Oops. And there's one more thing that we need to do, and that is we need to we need to output the grid. And for now, where there isn't anything visible, it's just going to be a question mark. And later on we'll have different characters like M for monster and X for the player, and so on. And so what we need to do is we need to do an if statement, and that is going to be if. Actually, no, we don't need to do that at all. We'll need to do that later on once we have the character defined, but for now, since we don't have that, all we're going to do is be drawing the grid. What we need to do is we need to do system.stdout, which is standard out, and we're going to write, and it's going to be a question mark. Now the reason why we're using this rather than using print is that print prints something on a new line every time, whereas system standard output does not do that. Now because here this is currently just writing in a straight line, if I was to do, and if I go down to the bottom and do monster.draw grid, and up here in init, I'm just going to comment this out and add pass. What you'll see is that all of this has been added into one line, and that is no good. What we need to do is for each, when we get to the end of the horizontal axis, then we need to start a new horizontal row. And the way that we do that is if we do stys system standard output dot write, and we're just going to create a return carriage which is /r/n, and then if we run this again, you'll see here we get a 5x5 grid. So that's all it takes to draw a grid within Python, or within any language really. However, you'll see later on that this gets much more confusing and much more complicated as we add extra elements to the actual game.